Chapter 11. The Fisherman's Maps. My seasickness had faded by the next day, but I kept pretending to hack up my guts so I could stay in my room as much as possible. I did feel sick, but not from the sea. What if that boy, Grebe, recognized me? That night, when he followed me into the fens, it had been dark already, and I'd been dressed in my worn-out clothes. Surely I'd looked like any other kid from Down Island. But what if he did put it together and told someone? If anyone found out who I really was, Payun would be humiliated. He'd know I'd been lying to him about my family, about everything, and he might even ship me back to An Long at the next port. Not only did I have no future to look forward to after our journey's end, now my very place on the expedition was in danger. So I tried to avoid Grebe, which wasn't an easy feat on a crowded ship, even one as big as the Prosperity. The sailors worked in 6-hour shifts they called watches. Captain Sangra kept a portion of her crew constantly manning the sails or rinsing the lines, while the rest slept in their hammocks. When officers rang the bell, they would switch. I tried to never be up on deck during Grebe's watch, though my training with Payun meant I couldn't always avoid it. The only places I felt safely hidden were my own room and Payun's. Luckily, the old man had plenty of work for me to do in his cabin. No, don't put that there, Payun shouted at me. That box is full of ship's logs. Very important, and they will get ruined from the salt spray coming in from the window. Yes, sir, I grunted, moving the box from one corner of the tiny room to the other. Not there either. Oh, blast it, Si, do I have to do everything myself? The master mapmaker was in a mood. Whoever had loaded his crates onto the ship had jumbled them all up, and he was afraid that some of his more precious items were missing. Master Payun's cabin was one of the nicer bedrooms on the ship, which meant that it was about the size of a large closet. A very luxurious closet, though, with teak walls and furniture polished to a shine. The bed was built right against the ship's hull, with a cabinet beneath for storage. A narrow desk and bench took up the corner, with built-in bookshelves overhead. It was a very efficient use of space, but we were still crammed in like dumplings in a basket. Oof! I set the box down among a half-dozen others. Well, sir, you won't run out of reading material on this voyage, that's for sure. You talk as if I've brought along novels, grumbled Payun as he began opening the box. These crates are full of vitally important documents. Every book, chart, ship's log, or captain's diary I could get my hands on that deals with anything south of the equator. And I'll need to read them all if I'm to help Captain Sangra decide what course to take in the southern seas. We don't already have a course plotted out, sir? Payun scowled. Course setting takes time. No one ever seems to understand that. Our expedition left in such a hurry that I didn't have enough time to finalize it. He turned to wag his finger at me. There's no telling what we'll find once we cross the 50th parallel. Islands full of riches or leagues and leagues of empty ocean. It's up to me, and the captain, of course, to pick the best route and then get us home and... finally the one I've been looking for. Payun bent to pick up a small wooden box that had been hidden behind the others. His hands shook, making the lid slide off. Several handkerchiefs spilled out and fluttered to the floor. I set down the crate I was carrying and rushed to help him. Here, let me get those, sir. I scooped up the handkerchiefs and started stacking them in my palm. No, give them to me, Payun shouted. Startled, I stood up and held the little cloths out to him. I'm sorry, sir. I was just trying to help. His fingers trembled as he reached out to take them from me. He lowered his hands again and pressed them flat at his sides. You are a help to me, Si. Of course you are, he said softly. I felt awkward and embarrassed for both of us and didn't know what to say. I tried to think of an excuse to leave, but Payun shuffled to his desk and waved at me to follow. Come, bring them here, and we'll look at them together. I pulled a large crate up next to his chair and gently spread the handkerchiefs out in front of us. They were yellowing and old. Some of them had frayed or torn edges. When I looked closer, I realized that what I had thought was embroidery were actually faded lines scrawled onto the fabric with an ink pen. These handkerchiefs are pretty, sir, I said, bending over them.
Not handkerchiefs, maps.
Payun looked up at me from beneath his bushy eyebrows, his eyes gleaming bright and mischievous. I had to smile. Nothing cheered him up more than talking about maps.
To be exact, he went on, they are fishermen's maps. It's an old way of map-making, a lost art that few people in Mancon remember. You draw them on silk, using a pen dipped in model fish ink so that it won't smudge. You can roll them up in your pocket or stitch them right onto the ship's sails. Even soaked with water, they wouldn't be damaged.
Where did you get them, sir?
In the harbor market in Anlong. There's an old woman who sells trinkets from all over the globe. She sells me these little charts cheaply, calls them chicken scratch rags. Payun grinned. She has no idea that I would pay 10 times her price. They may not be beautiful, but they are worth a fortune to me. We think we're so fancy with our expensive pens and paper, but this is how you make a map when you are sailing beyond the borders of the world.
I raised my eyebrows. That far, sir?
He nodded. Fishermen chase fish, and fish go everywhere.
I looked down at the maps in awe. I had never considered that anyone else may have seen as much of the world as Payun. I gently ran my fingers along the fraying edge of one of the silks. This one is beautiful, sir. The chart showed a cluster of islands with pretty little waves sketched in the bays. That looks like the Padu archipelago, but I can't understand the words written here.
Payun nodded approvingly. Yes, very good. And you can't read it because it's written in Pramong. The Pramong are a fishing people, and almost all the silk maps I have were made by them. They settled around the Padu archipelago for a time. I can only make out a few words in their language. Mostly, I marvel at their drawings.
Most of the little charts were Pramong, but Payun also had a couple from Mancon, showing the 9 islands and Rotan beyond. But it was the last map in the stack that caught my eye. It was the smallest chart and seemed to be the oldest. I could barely make out the faded ink lines. There were no words on it at all, no scale or compass. The map showed a chain of islands that curled in a crescent shape. Each island along the chain was smaller than the one next to it, as if someone had sorted them neatly by size. But the best part of the map had nothing to do with geography. A long, elegant dragon snaked through the islands, its body undulating like waves around the shores. "Oh, this one is my favorite," I said, picking it up carefully. "Do you think they drew this because they saw a dragon there?" I had meant to make him laugh, but Payun had turned serious. Lost in thought, he had taken out his eyeglass from his waistcoat and was looking down through the lens at the little faded map. He glanced at me as if I had startled him.
Ah, the dragon. He snapped his eyeglass back into its case. That is one of the trickiest things about sorting through any of these documents. You have to sift out the facts from the fantasies. Sailors have good eyes, but after so long at sea, they often see visions that aren't truly there, and they love making up stories. But these little maps can teach us a lot if we know how to look at them. Master Payun always kept up an invisible wall around himself, but for this brief moment, I felt like he had let it come down. I wanted to ask 100 more questions, but I saw him rub his hands together. When he took a breath, he sighed as if the air itself were heavy. I could tell the old man was tired. I yawned loudly. "Oh, Master Payun, I'm sorry, but I'm feeling so tired. Do you mind if I take a little break?" "Oh, yes, of course," he said, scooping up the fishermen's maps and placing them carefully in their box. "You should get up top and let the fresh air revive you." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." I left Payun, hoping he might take a nap, and walked down the short, narrow hallway that led from his room to the main deck. I paused in the doorway before stepping out into the sunlight. I didn't want to risk bumping into Grebe if he was on watch. I didn't see him, but I did see Miss Ryan leaving her room. She shut the door behind her and started for the stairs that led to the quarterdeck. I opened the door a little farther so I could watch her glide up the steps, her back coattails fluttering behind her. She was so interesting. I'd never seen someone walk the way she did, regal as a lady, but whistling like a schoolgirl. I took a step forward to try to get a better view of her face, but the wind whipped her short hair across her cheeks. I saw flashes of her eyes, her lips, her nose, but never all at once. I still didn't know exactly what she looked like. A sudden smile spread over my face as I took the dark stairway down to my own room. I had been inspired.